Hi, my name is Reed Silverne. The name of this show is Fed Pride. The reason it's called Fed Pride is because I'm a federal worker and proud of it. And for me, today is September 28th. For you, it's probably going to be October 1st or 2nd. I'm going to have to figure it out. I'm on Tuesdays, and I do this on Fridays. So whatever I say is going to be out of date. However, this is live to tape, and live to tape means that if I fall off my chair here in this particular studio, then boom, I'm gone. I'm going to do the traditional spinning of the earth, and I notice that this my up and down is off the screen, so I'm probably not going to be changing my location very much, but I will bring America over here above my shoulder so that you can see it. And today I'm going to talk about a number of things. There's been so much that's been happening the last week or so. Ahmadinejad, every year about September is a new year for the General Assembly of the UN. And again, New York City, right about there. And every year is a new year for the General Assembly. And consequently, for about a week, there is a Leaders of the World Fest at the General Assembly. And President Bush made a speech. Ahmadinejad, the president of Iran, made a speech. Ortega, the president of Nicaragua, made a speech and trashed us. Chavez usually comes in. He came in last year and made a speech calling our president devil right in front of Diablo, right in front of the American people. That didn't go over too well. He's chosen not to come this year because he's going to Saudi Arabia. He's going to push the price of oil to $100 a barrel. Why does he need to? A, because he's vastly increased his purchases of arms, which I think is a threat to the whole region, to our region. But B, because he has to support almost every sector of his economy with oil funds. There's free health care in the slums. Almost every driver is supported with not free, but almost free, basically 30 cents a gallon gas for their cars. There's all kinds of subsidies throughout the whole economy. It's all based on the price of oil being high. If the price of oil came down, he'd be in trouble. Same thing with Ahmadinejad. Even at the price of oil at over $80, Iran is in economic trouble. They tried to increase the price of gas to the cars. Oddly enough, Iran actually, in fact, I can change the world. Let me do that. Iran is right there. Iran actually imports gasoline from other countries with refineries, especially here in the Gulf, because they don't have enough refinery capacity of their own. And as a result, they have a tremendous subsidy, up to $17 billion a year, basically subsidizing gas because they want to go and become a superpower, and they want to support Hezbollah, and they want to do this and they want to do that. They actually tried to increase the price of gas to limit the subsidy only to the first 3 liters, less than a gallon, and then to charge full price to their people for all the rest. There were riots in Tehran, the capital of Iran, and the mullahs basically told Ahmadinejad to just quiet down and shut up. Of course, he has proceeded to come to the UN. He was going to come about 6 months ago and go to the UN and argue against sanctions. The chief mullah of Iran, the real leader, whose name was Ayatollah Khamenei, basically through his spokesman, another Ayatollah, told him to quiet down, shut up, everything you say just makes things worse. So Ahmadinejad has since gone to the UN. At the UN, he vowed to ignore UN measures right in front of all the major powers, that the dispute over the country's nuclear program is closed. Iran will disregard any UN resolutions. He wants only the IAEA, which they've also disagreed with, to take over all problems on nuclear. The IAEA has gone probably underneath the UN Security Council and asked a series of questions in order to tell whether what the relationship between the supposedly civilian nuclear research and the military is. Of course, it's run by the military in Iran. And up to now, they've refused any cooperation. There's of course, he's over here at the UN, so the IAEA inspectors are in Iran right now trying to get answers. And even if they provide the answers, which is unlikely, then they'll still be in violation of the UN resolution, which basically said, stop enriching uranium. And they've still been doing it. El-Baradei has been seeking separate accords with Iran. El-Baradei is the head of the IAEA. And basically, he went to the UN and the General Assembly, said that arrogant powers are coercing him. Excuse me. Boy, this doesn't happen too often. It's happening now. That arrogant powers are coercing Iran, and that the nuclear matter is closed. Now, he has been warned time and time again by the real leaders of Iran that he's not to disrupt, anger the Security Council and disrupt the diplomacy. He's been pushed out of diplomacy. A guy named Motaki, the foreign minister, has been conducting the diplomacy, and there's another special negotiator for the nuclear issue and the economic issues. And he's basically been told to butt out, stop it, and anything you say is just making it worse. Instead, he's gone there and basically told the Security Council to take a jump. The president of France, the new president of France, Sarkozy, basically has been saying that they need another round of sanctions. Iran doesn't want that. The mullahs don't want that. But most of all, the people who rioted because the subsidies on gas were temporarily taken down, they don't want any more sanctions. Basically, the next round, there's kind of unofficial sanctions going on. The last round basically forbid banks in Europe and America from doing business with certain banks in Iran. That can be expanded, and even in the EU, European Union, they're now talking about basically stopping the EU banks from doing business with Iran. That'll make it almost impossible for them to build the new refineries that they need in order to bring the refined gasoline to their people. They have plenty of oil. They do not have plenty of refined gasoline. So that's a little bit of what happened. Of course, everybody who watches talk shows knows that Ahmadinejad was invited to Columbia University by the president of Columbia, who basically called him a dictator and questioned his denial of the Holocaust and his wanting to wipe out Israel off the map and all this stuff like that. Basically, now Ahmadinejad said at that particular meeting that, or I think it was a news conference, that he wants a referendum of everybody from the river to the sea in Palestine and Israel to conduct a referendum as to whether there should be an Israel. Of course, why shouldn't the Israelis be limited? But if they did that right now, the Jewish Israelis have a slight majority over all of the non-Jews in that area. And if they took his advice, they might end up with a referendum that incorporates Palestine, the West Bank and the Gaza Strip into Israel instead of destroying the state of Israel and replacing it with a state of Palestine. So that's a pretty dumb idea. I'm sure anybody who goes to either Hamas or or even Fatah right now and says, why don't you just have a referendum of everybody who lives in Palestine and Israel in order to decide whether there should be one state which can be dominated by Israel? They probably say that's a pretty dumb idea right now, while there's still a majority of Jews in that area. So that's just another foot and mouth thing that he's done. But the biggest foot and mouth thing was that he declared that there were no homosexuals at all in the entire country of Iran. And that came up at that meeting. Somebody asked why they execute homosexuals in Iran. Obviously, there have been executions of people for sodomy or homosexuality in Iran. And he came up with kind of a bizarre discussion that there are no homosexuals in Iran. It's just propaganda. Who told them that there were homosexuals there, and so on and so forth. And, you know, probably any population is a certain percentage of homosexuals, including Iran. And since then, some Iranian refugees, you know, or expatriates who are homosexuals said, of course there are homosexuals there, homosexuals everywhere. So it was ridiculous. It was ridiculous on its face. Everybody laughed. And there was an article about the press inside Iran, the state press, that said that certain people who gave Ahmadinejad the advice to speak at Columbia University within Iran were misled and need to be criticized. And that's funny because they said that New York was the headquarters of Zionist Jews, that Zionist Jews trapped him into appearing at Columbia University making a fool of himself. Nobody had to trap him to make a fool of himself. He's well known inside Iran and subject of mirth within Iran. And the mullahs are very, very concerned because every time he opens up his mouth, there's another Security Council resolution that hurts the general economy. And if the general economy gets hurt over there, basically the regime, the mullah regime, is in danger of being overthrown. Let's face it, it was the bazaris and the middle class in Iran, even though they were supported by the poor people, that overthrew the Shah in 1979 and brought the mullahs in the first place. So the last thing they need is a situation where a president who is elected, who belongs to the government, it's the unelected mullahs that are worried about the elected president taking over the country. So it's a funny situation in Iran. Basically, the way he got into power was Khamenei, the real leader, the supreme leader, the head Ayatollah in Iran, didn't like Khatami, who was the reformist president, forbid all of the reformists from running for any elected office, which tells you it's not a democracy, not completely. But they do have elections. So what they did was Rafsanjani, who's an old-time politician but also a mullah in Iran, was probably next in line if the reformists didn't get there to be president. So in order to, he was not popular with Khatami, so they put up what they thought would be a figurehead, Ahmadinejad, who's basically, his power center is the Revolutionary Guard, Islamic Guard, which are kind of the radical parallel militaries, kind of like the KGB of Iran, to run for president. And he immediately started appointing his own people, which any normal president in a democracy would be able to do, to the cabinet, his own oil minister, his own finance minister, and so on and so forth. And he has really stepped on the toes and reduced the power, but not completely, of course, of the supreme leader. So Ahmadinejad is in trouble, there's no doubt about it, internally. And he's also considered kind of a joke, kind of a fool. He said that he has been appointed by God. He said that he is a harbinger of the Mahdi, the 12th Imam, who is in the Shiite way of thinking, the Messiah. And he said some things that basically the more intelligent people in Iran and religious people as well just think is ridiculous. So he hasn't done himself any good over here. The people who told him to go to New York, and I'm sure that the mullahs told him not to, and he decided to anyway, because he's that kind of guy. He just likes attention seeking. Went ahead and did it, made a fool of himself, and now Sarkozy, not even just America, and Bush have more reason, because of the refusal to pay attention to UN resolutions, to start a new round of sanctions in the UN. We'll see what happens. Basically, the Iranians didn't do themselves any good with this. I'm going to talk about another issue, and that is internal. And you know that I have been on that probably the greatest threat to our national security is oil importing. And a lot of the companies that import oil also produce oil inside our country. Not enough, but some. And there's been a big problem because there's a very small agency, and that agency is called the Minerals Management Service, and their responsibility is to lease federal land to oil and gas drillers and to collect royalties and taxes from them. Basically, there are $10 billion of taxes that have not been collected. This is the agency that did the oil leases in the Gulf, right around here, and I'm for developing deep oil. But what they did was there is a clause that is supposed to be in every single oil lease that says that they don't have to pay taxes if the price of oil is under $34 a barrel, but they do if it's more. And they wrote a bunch of contracts. This is during the Clinton administration. I don't know why they didn't overrule it. That said that they don't have to pay any taxes no matter what the price of oil is. So now the price of oil is $83 a barrel, and all the oil companies, and I tell you, there's plenty of profit to be made, and pay the tax too. Don't have to pay a penny of tax. There's a loss of $18 billion. Some say 10, some say $18 billion over a decade already because of that. Now, some audits have been done and found that these oil companies that are drilling on federal lands within the U.S. Shorted the government $10 billion. And actually, some of these were found in a series of audits. Now, there has been a IG investigation of this. The IG has found that the report is part of a year-long investigation, grew out of complaints by 4 auditors at the agency that senior administration officials had blocked them from recovering money the oil companies had underpaid the government. This is so ridiculous. This is about collecting $10 billion during wartime, during a time of deficits. $10 billion that were owed. This is not, the changing the contracts thing that they've been trying to get through Congress, where they forgot to include a clause that requires them to pay royalties. This is $10 billion under our present law that was underpaid. And probably, well, I'm not going to say on purpose, but I would doubt that they would have come forward. There's a profound failure in the agency's technology for monitoring oil and gas payments. They're too cozy with the oil companies. And that basically they took these 4 guys and pushed them aside, pushed them out of their jobs, refused to tell them whether they were going to be kept. One of the guys lost his job as part of a reorganization that was unnecessary because they don't have enough auditors already to collect the money that's owed them. They reorganized and took one of the senior auditors and put him out of his job. The report that they did, there was one report in the Denver group, one report out of the Oklahoma group. The Denver group was reviewed by the quality inspector of audits. He approved it. and said it was fine. It was reviewed by his supervisor, said it was fine. It was sent up to the bosses in Washington, D.C., who suppressed the audit. Now, to me, that is one of the most serious violations that could occur within a government agency. To suppress an audit, especially an audit where companies have been found to have wrongdoing, to have underpaid, and then to suppress an audit in order to aid a company that has underpaid its tax. That is unconscionable, and I'm going to say that. I'm going to say that right here, right now, that it's unconscionable. Any federal employee, any Fed who is an appointee of any administration should be ashamed that an audit is suppressed that way, and that the auditors are pushed out of their jobs or forced out. Now, what the auditors did was very funny. There's what we call the False Claims Act. After their audit was suppressed, after they went through all the internal ways, after they got their supervisor, after they got it reviewed by the audit quality people, they went under the False Claims Act. There's what we call a False Claims Act within the government, DOD, DOE, doesn't matter what agency, anybody within the government. If they find that there is a false claim by the government, and that false claim in this case is, I paid my taxes, an individual who knows about it can actually go to court on behalf of the government, and he will be paid the claim times 3, and the person who brought the claim can actually get a portion of the judgment. Basically, there was a small company was the first one that was claimed against, and the jury awarded it was Anadarko. I'm not familiar with that company. It's one of the small ones that had cheated the government of $7.5 million. This is what the jury said. The judge reversed the jury on technical grounds, but it still has to go up the ladder. Investigators confirmed that particular auditor, Mr. Maxwell's assertions that senior governments in Washington ordered him to drop the case. The supervisor supported his view, and the lawyers in Washington opposed him. Basically, anybody who knows about a false claim, whistleblower, an auditor, is allowed and encouraged by statute law to be able to make this to make a claim under the False Claims Act. The court says it's not legit. That's fine. What did they do when they filed the claim? This is after their audit was suppressed. Then they filed the claim. One of the claims has already been confirmed by a jury. They fired one of them, or disappeared his job under a reorganization. The other 3 were told that because they filed a false claim, they could no longer do their job, but they didn't tell them what job they could do. They left them in limbo, kind of on permanent suspension. Randall Luthi, the director of the Materials Management Service, said the Inspector General, this is an Inspector General report that brought this out, indicated the lawsuits the auditors filed were the results of the auditor's lack of knowledge. The audit was confirmed, and the jury confirmed it too, and that it was a result of the auditor's lack of knowledge. Found that whistleblowers had not properly reported their suspicions to appropriate authorities. They put it in an audit. How was that not reporting it? What are they supposed to do? Jump on the desk and yell it out? Particularly striking were complaints by 2 auditors in Oklahoma City. Randall Little and Lannis Morris said that senior officials have refused to demand $1.5 million in back interest from oil companies caught underpaying, saying that requiring the companies to calculate their own bills would be a hardship. The companies should be asking to calculate their own bill. They're obviously going to come out better than if the government does it. So the whole thing, I think, is ridiculous. I think it's a shame. I think that the materials manager, or the head of the Materials Management Service, should resign, and I'm saying this on my show. My name is Reed Silverne. The name of the show is Fed Pride. The reason it's called Fed Pride is because I'm a federal employee and proud of it, and I'd like to remain proud of it, and I would like guys like Randall Luthi to be out of the government.